Everything is currently fighting for our attention. We look at something for 2 seconds, scroll, like, next. And I'm very guilty of participating in that world. However, I recently came across an artist called Makoto Fujimura, and I read his book, Art is Life. And I came across something that I've added to my practice. I came across his idea of a listening room. And the idea around the listening room for him is simple. He puts a work of art up in his house, and he goes and sits with it for 10, 20 minutes, sometimes longer. And he just looks at the work, stares at the work, listens to the work. I think it was really interesting because it came up with this idea of actually sitting with the work, not just making it. So we expect people, when we make art, that people are going to buy the art, but we don't often sit with it ourselves before the people who purchase the art or our collectors do. So we often have these conversations about what it was like when we made it. How did it feel when we made the work, or what conditions were they when we made it? We don't often allow the idea of what comes up for us when we sit with it. I think what was really strong for me is I've never been someone who's been really good at sitting still. So it was really interesting challenge for me to sit with the work that I'm making and just to sit with it and not have to understand why or what I was trying to get from it, but just to be able to give it that time to sit with it and see if anything did come up for me. I think even more so because I've said before, but I was never an abstract artist. I was never someone who understood abstract work. I didn't do abstract work up until probably 2 years ago. With the photographs I used to make, the thing I loved about them was it was quite obvious. I could look at it and immediately tell you if I liked it or not, or if I got it or not, or if it made sense to me or not. With abstract, that question doesn't really sit in the same place because it's asking you a different question, which the listening room really helps with. And it's simple, are you willing to sit with something and see what comes up within you? Because I think for me, as someone who's recently come into this abstract world, I was always confused because I was trying to understand what the artist wanted me to get from it. And I think I'm missing the key point of why we make art in the first place. It's not because I want to tell you something about it, I want to make something that you sit with and can get something for yourself. Which I think that disconnect was the one thing that was probably always stopping me from getting more out of work, because I wouldn't sit with it. I wouldn't go to these places and look at those pieces for any length of time. It was very much a glancing past. You walk, see if you get something from it and move on to the next. Whereas I think certain work demands a certain level of attention. And in the book, Makoto Fujimura has displayed next to Rothko. And that's an artist that I've never really understood. I can tell you the work's beautiful, but I've never really got much from the work. But now I'm starting to realize it's because I've not looked at it. I've not actually sat with the work, spent time with it, and see what's come up for me in that work. Because there's no denying the value and the skill set and the quality in the work. But I always thought there was something wrong with me, or that it was something to do with me that I never got anything when I looked at it. But I think it was because I expected to get it immediately. And one thing has been really enjoyable about exploring this idea of a listening room is that I'm sitting with work, but it's bringing up things in me that I didn't ever experience before, or things that I've never come across before, and that's just in my work. So I'm really excited to look at different works of art now in person and be able to apply the same strategy and sit with it properly and hopefully get a little bit uncomfortable and be willing to sit with it long enough that I can experience something within me, not just like me walking in and going, I don't get it, and moving on to the next. And I think that's a skill I'm trying to learn in my art practice, which is I used to make quite literal work where I wanted someone to get something from it immediately. But now I'm okay with a little bit of ambiguity. I would rather someone sit with something and get it, because that's something that I don't know if I can ever get across in the work. Because I think great artwork comes innately through you, and that's where the connection comes. I think having that space for a little bit of ambiguity for somebody to join and connect within themselves is what makes an artwork go to a different level. I often think the greatest kind of analogy for good art is probably music, because you can be in a stadium with 5, 10, 15, 50,000 people, and everybody can understand that music has power, but the actual power of what that song or that moment is doing for each person is so individual to them, but collectively it's so strong because everybody is willing to sit with it and be there and be present and get something from it. But what they could be getting could be so different depending on the context of what they bring into it. And I think that's the strength of art, is this, what you get from it often comes from the context in which you approach it with. So this new series for me, I think, is going to be really interesting because the idea is very strong in me, and I know there's people who I've shown it to who already get something from it, but I know they have connection to the context around that it was made. So it's going to be really interesting to see if people who don't have that context sit with it and get something different. Sitting with this work for me has been interesting because it completely changed how I viewed the frame as a whole, not the work in itself. So looking at it, I've done multiple stints of sitting with different pieces for 10 minutes or more. And what's been really interesting is every time something else has got my attention. Sometimes it's a little detail in the corner, sometimes it's a cluster in the middle, or sometimes it's the whole frame as a whole and viewing it as a constraint in which can expand. So I suppose for me in this, it's something that I think has been invaluable to my current work, but also just giving me a stronger way of understanding my work, but also understanding other work. So maybe it's, we just live in such a distracted world that this has become such a foreign concept to most people. After reading Makoto's book and doing this, I think it's something that everybody should do more often, is sit with their work properly, look at it, stare at it when you look at it so that you can get everything you possibly can from your piece at that time.